Here are 8 hikes we did in 8 days in Rocky Mountain National Park. Starting on the east side of the park, the Estes Park side, our first hike was to Lawn Lake. We got to the trailhead about 7:30 and it was already pretty full. Part of the trail is along the Roaring River, which has pretty steep banks. There used to be a dam at Lawn Lake, but back in 1982 it broke and all the water came down the river and carved out the deep riverbed. Usually we pick an easy to moderate hike for our first day while we get used to the change in elevation, but Lawn Lake is pretty ambitious for us. It's about 13 miles round trip. But if you can make it to the lake, the views are great. We stopped for lunch and some pictures, and it was time to head back just in time to beat the rain. Next, we set out to hit the summits of some mountains. Most of this trail is unofficial, so it's not on any park map. Start halfway up Old Fall River Road at the Chapin Pass trailhead. It's a quick, steep climb to get up and out of the trees. After maybe a mile, the official trail ends, but the unofficial trail is really easy to follow. Up here in the tundra is probably my favorite type of landscape in the park. We got lucky and the weather was great, a beautiful day and not too much wind. If you like marmots, you're in luck. They are everywhere up here. Here we are at the top of Mount Chapin. Behind us is Mount Chiquita, our second stop. The trail isn't technical or hard to follow, but it is strenuous. It's like walking up stairs for what seems like forever.
This is hard.
But the amazing views make it worthwhile. At the top of Mount Chiquita, we didn't linger long. Storm clouds were forming in the distance, and there were some pretty aggressive marmots who really wanted to get into my snacks. So instead of continuing on to Ypsilon Mountain, the third summit on this unofficial trail, we headed back. Once you get back to the car, since Old Fall River Road is one way, you've got to continue on all the way up to the Alpine Visitor Center. And we got stuck in the worst traffic I've ever seen up there because of some road construction. But it was totally worth it. This is an amazing hike. Next, we headed to Sandbeach Lake. I'd heard about this trail for a while and always wanted to see what passes for a beach in Colorado. Most of this hike is a pretty steep climb through the forest. Once we got to the lake, we stopped for lunch and took in the views. Sandbeach Lake used to have a dam, but after the Lawn Lake flood, they removed all the other dams. And then the water level dropped, and that's why the edge of the lake here is sand. There are plenty of spots with great views all around the lake. This is a great place to hang out for a while and relax. Our next hike isn't in the park, but it's very close. Just outside of Estes Park is the Hermit Park open space. It's $9 per vehicle to get in, and there are trails and some cabins too. This area used to belong to HP, who used it as a corporate retreat, but the county bought it about 10 years ago. The trail to Kruger Rock is pretty short and easy, with some great views of Estes Park and Long's Peak along the way. To get to the very top of Kruger Rock, you need to scramble up some rocks and use your hands, but you're protected on both sides, so this is pretty easy. The views from the top are worth that final scramble. Overall, this is a great short hike that's probably closer to town than anything in the park. On our last day in Estes Park, we set out to see Andrews Glacier. We'd tried this once before and turned back just before the end, so we thought we'd try one more time. Unfortunately, when we got to the rocky part along Andrews Creek, the rocks were pretty covered in snow. Since we knew how rough that terrain was under the snow, we thought it was too risky and turned back. We did see a couple of climbers out there, though. And here's why Alberta Falls is best viewed in the early morning. I'm sure one day we'll make it all the way to Andrews Glacier. Then we headed over to Grand Lake for a few days on the west side of the park. On the way over, we stopped for a rare treat, a loop hike at Green Mountain. This trail features the ruins of an old ranch that overlooks a beautiful meadow. So nice we decided to stop for a snack. Part of this trail is along the Continental Divide Trail, or CDT. A good chunk of this hike is in a burn area where there's no shade, and it was pretty hot. And somehow it felt like the entire loop was uphill. Still, it's pretty nice to hike a loop, and also a trail we'd never been on before. Next, we hit the trail early for a long hike to Lake Verna from East Inlet Trailhead. Right away, you see Adams Falls, probably the closest falls to a trailhead in the whole park. A bit of walking through a meadow along a creek, and then the climbing starts. There's a lot of climbing on this hike, but the views are worth it. After several miles, we made it to Lone Pine Lake. Way back when it was named, there was just one pine tree there in the middle of the lake. The section after Lone Pine Lake to Lake Verna turned out to be one of the most beautiful places we'd ever seen in the park. Too bad it starts 5 miles from the trailhead. Near Lake Verna, there's a backcountry campsite. This would be a great place to camp and continue on, since there are a few more lakes farther down this trail. Lake Verna did not disappoint. It was absolutely beautiful. If you're on the west side and are looking for a long hike, definitely try this trail. On our last day, we treated ourselves to a shorter hike to Cascade Falls. We didn't see any mountain lions like the sign warned about, but right at the trailhead, we did run into this fox. And we also saw some moose for the first time in the park. They usually hang out on the west side. This trail is also on part of the CDT. The first part's on a dirt road bordering private property. About 3.5 miles down the trail, you make it to Cascade Falls. The falls were a lot bigger than I expected. This is a good hike if you're looking for something a little more flat. After 8 hikes and 70 miles, it was time to head back to Florida. All the other trails will just have to wait until next time.